Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Bircher, Director of Technical Services here at CTC. And today we are kicking off a two-part webinar series on running code calculations using tools from the BIM project suite, specifically Occupant Flow Analyzer and Spreadsheet Link. And then we'll show a little bit of Schedule Excel in the mix as well, just to kind of cap off and enhance the workflow a little bit. We've got a handful of different examples and workflows that we're going to talk about. Before we get into it, though, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions during the webinar. I'll be monitoring the questions panel. So if I see something that is in line with what I'm talking about, I will answer it. Otherwise, I will make sure to cover everything at the end. If you're watching the recording on YouTube, please, and you have a question, please ask a comment in the comment section or leave it in the comment section, and we monitor those as well. So we'll get back to you and make sure that your questions are answered. So let's get going. So traditionally, a lot of our code stuff, for example, calculating occupancies, or we want to do a means of egress, or we need to, multifamily housing, we're trying to calculate the number of firewalls, or based off occupancies, or I need to calculate the number of plumbing fixtures I need to have based off the occupant counts and things of that nature. A lot of that happens outside of Revit. Now we can do it in Revit, and it involves some pretty good knowledge of the schedules and how to manipulate some parameters and some calculated values and whatnot. But we can't always get everything, and it makes it tedious and challenging, and not everyone on your project can do it. There's usually a select few people that know how to do that, and they're the ones that are then responsible for making sure that process can take off and function properly. With the BIM project suite, specifically with Occupant Flow Analyzer and Spreadsheet Link, we can put together these calculations, and I'm going to show you how to do that today and next time in part 2, and make sure that this process is sound, consistent, and repeatable, and that can be used on any project as long as certain parameters that are oftentimes already in your projects are being used and used properly. So we're going to show you how that all works today, not today and in the next session in part 2. And today we're going to be focusing on specifically the Occupant Flow Analyzer workflow for calculating your occupants. And we're going to use Spreadsheet Link to also as another means of calculating occupancies, but then to also use it in conjunction with calculating, using the occupant values and calculating your plumbing fixture counts based on what some of those values are, and giving you some different iterations. I'm going to explain how a lot of that works and where you can get some additional resources on how to do that. And then in the next webinar, we're going to do more with the occupancies. We're going to piggyback off what we've already done and start utilizing that to calculate additional means of egress and all that good stuff. So stick around for them both. But I don't like doing PowerPoints. To me, they make me sleepy. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to explain how we get this set up and how we can make it happen in Revit and using tools from the BIM project suite. Now, a lot of this, again, like I mentioned earlier, we can kind of do in Revit already with a series of schedules. And this works with rooms or areas or spaces. It's whatever you're using in your projects and what your workflow is, we can get this accommodated. I use areas and rooms frequently, being that I'm on the architectural side of things. In this example today, I'm using rooms. Areas involve a little bit more work because now we have to do the area plan. I got to make sure the scheme's set up properly. I got to draw in all my boundary lines. Revit doesn't always put my boundary lines where I want them, so I have to end up manually drawing those in a lot. Rooms aren't always in the right spot either, but I feel like I'm closer, and it takes less time, and I can get quicker outputs using rooms. So what I've done in preparation for this is I've done a couple of different things already. So I've got my office building, which is what I typically use for my demos, but I also have a couple of schedules and schedule keys in place already. So I have my occupancy category key, which allows me to specify what the space type is and what the load factors are, or the area per person, being 300 square feet for an ag building, or for a business area, it's 100 square foot per person, right? And these values, this is a schedule key, which I can then use later on in my rooms themselves, and start to define a couple of extra bits of information that I take advantage of later on down the line. Okay, so this took a little bit of time to step up. I just used the IBC 2021 code, I think is what I used just recently. And actually, I'll just pull up exactly what I was looking at so you guys can see what I mean. From chapter 10 and right here. So I pulled this off of the iccsafe.org website, and was able to get a bunch of information at my disposal rather easily, and it gave me all the charts and tables and codes, and I believe the other ones were up here. Yeah, so it gives you what the codes are and what they mean and all the different special stuff in case you need to get your access to that. This gives you a pretty good summary of all that stuff. So that's what I was using in this case as my reference to help me make sure I didn't miss anything and got the right numbers put in place. Then I built my schedule. And my schedule is just the room itself. By default, all of my occupancy types or categories were set to none because someone's got to specify it. So the ones where it made sense, I've gone ahead and specified what the room type is supposed to be. It then also puts in the area per person for me because that's what schedule keys do. And then it gives me, obviously, if the room's placed, you get the area. And then I can set up some formulas and some maths to kick out an occupancy value, right? In this case, this particular parameter is, I believe the one that Revit gives you is just a text-based property. So formulas don't work in a text-based property. So now you got to create your own calculated value and so on and so forth. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of this, really. This is kind of how you would do it natively in Revit. I like doing this anyway, just so that I can get my area, my load factors in place, and then attached to the room. And if I was using areas, I would do the exact same thing. I would do an area schedule based off the area type that I'm using, whether it's the default gross building or rentable, or if you make up your own scheme and call it, say, code plan / life safety / occupancies. You can make your own area plan type, and then you can build your schedules and schedule keys based off those, so that they're not interfering and overlapping with the other schedules. But I would do that part anyway. Then I'm jumping into my next piece here. So I've got my code plan is what I'm using. I've got all my rooms placed. I've got things labeled in my properties of the rooms themselves. If I just grab that one. Here's the occupancy category here, which was business area / open office. and it's inputting area per person for me. And then I get the opportunity here to define my occupancy values, so I've already added the parameter. I'm going to show you how I did that. There's a couple of different ways we can go about doing this. Obviously, the way we're all used to doing this is creating a parameter in your project and adding it. A project parameter would work, just a standard good old project parameter. So manage project parameters, add, and just boom, right out of the gate, give it a name, call it occupancy calcs or however you want to label it. The key is to make sure that it's a number. Where did number go? There it goes. And applied to your space type, whether it's areas, rooms, or spaces, or areas and rooms if you're going to use it a couple of different ways. And then as instance, group it wherever you want. I typically put mine under identity data. Doesn't matter though. And that's good for your project. However, you can't tag it then. So if you want it to show up in your tags, you got to make it a shared parameter. So if you're not that familiar with setting up shared parameters and sourcing from a shared parameter file, that's okay. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be tagged. But if you do like it tagged, then you walk through this exercise of hitting shared parameter. If you need to create a new one, hit create new, specify where you want to save it. It's just a glorified text file, basically. And then you'll get the opportunity to create a new group if you have to, and then create the parameter itself. So I've already done all that, and I'm going to show you how I set it up here, just so you guys see it. Here it is. If I hit not move, properties, here it is. It's just the name, whatever you want to call it. The type of parameter is number, which is found under common. Okay. This may be review for many of you, or very basic stuff. I just want to make sure everybody understands it, how I've set this up. Okay. So I've already done it. I don't need to add it. It's already here. I'm going to take a few steps backwards now. So this, and then I edited my code tag, and I made sure that that occupancy parameter was being used as a label here, right? Occupancy, I had to add it from my shared parameter file to load it in. So now I have a tag that'll read the parameter and the values that I just set up. And that's really, outside of using my schedules and creating a schedule key, that's the shared parameter that I've had to make. Everything else can be a project parameter. All right, now for the fun part. I'm going to open up Occupancy Flow Analyzer. So this tool does more than what I'm showing today. We're going to focus on the occupant load calculations here, but this will also help you set up the critical paths, or helping you find the shortest path between 2 points, and which is pretty slick. We're not going to show that today. If you want information about how Occupant Flow Analyzer works as a whole, check out the video on our YouTube channel. Just click the videos button, brings you right to it. For today's example, I'm focusing solely on the occupant load part. Now, the first thing we have to do though, so there's a couple of different things to make sure that this will work for us. The occupant load calculations tab is going to allow me to set everything up to run my calculations. So where am I getting my load factor parameter from? So if I go back to my room properties here, I am looking for area per person CTC, because that's what's got my value. And I know that's the right value because it's grayed out, which means it's linked up to my schedule key. So that's the one I'm going to use. I have down here then the opportunity to specify my occupancy values parameter, the one I just made as a shared parameter that's going to fit inside my tags here. If you don't have one yet when you get to this point and you just want to create a basic project parameter, go ahead and hit add parameter here. and you'll get a nice little window that pops up that allows you to do that. So that you don't have to close this and go back and play that game. You can just click the button, it'll fire up a dialog box for you, and allow you to do it. Now, I believe mine just opened up on my other screen. Yep, that's where it went. It's hiding. And now you can call it whatever you want, whether it's occupant load or however you want to specify it. I wouldn't call it just good old occupant because Revit already has an occupant parameter and you don't want people to get confused, which is why I have the underscore CTC in my name or in my parameter value. So I've already made one. I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to specify the appropriate one here. From this point, then I have the opportunity to specify what room or spatial type I'm using, rooms, areas, or spaces. Again, all three work as long as you set your parameters up accordingly. And then for the actual calculating of the values and where things are going to go, you have the opportunity here to set up your distribution or reallocating of things and rounding and whatnot. So if I set it up to do not distribute and it just let it run its raw values, I'm going to get the exact number. So for example, a space may say 26.26394, and that's an odd number to have as your number of occupants. We can force feed our rounding values in there into the tags itself so that you always just have a rounded value, or you can just use one of these other options. And then there's some additional rules and such you can place for groups. You can do a smoke compartments and put some various other pieces in here and how it needs to round up and or down, if at all. So you have opportunities to play with some stuff here, and then there's the rounding option. You only get the rounding option if you choose one of the redistribute options. If it's set to none, that grays out, you can't touch it. So, but before I hit calculate, I need to take a step back and make sure that my occupant settings at the front side are set up the way I want it to be. And that really just means right here. And I know it's for the critical path, but again, we want to make sure that the proper parameters are being used and the spatial types. And at this point, you have the ability to run some ignoring of spaces or space types if their square footage is less than so much. So if you have if you're putting a room everywhere or a space everywhere, we have the opportunity to ignore them by default right out of the gate. And then, if their square footage is below a certain value, and that value could be whatever you choose. You also have the opportunity to deal with elements that are missing the parameter for whatever reason. So if like you were doing your areas, but you forgot to assign occupancy to that, if you hit ignore, you're not going to get any data back. Or if you were to hit assume an occupant load of 1, you're going to get data back, but it's going to seem off because everyone's got an occupant load of 1. So really, and this is just a default, a fail safe in a sense, to make sure that if for whatever reason an element doesn't have the appropriate parameter associated with it, at least it'll give you something. Or if it doesn't have the value, it'll not error or stop the process, really. And that's it. That's all we had to worry about. I have some additional stuff down here for targeting flow load and path outputs, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to jump back to our occupant load calculations, and now I can hit calculate. So, oh, I forgot one thing up here at the top. Phase considerations. So if you've got an existing building that you're adding on to, and you're only focused about the new part of the building, the existing part doesn't really matter to you, you can focus in on just the new part of the building. If your existing and new are heavily integrated with and interwoven, it might make sense to set it to any so that you have the opportunity to accommodate all different object types. And in my case, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave mine set to any because our building file has morphed over the years and the shells always remained the same, but the interiors have changed quite a lot. So I just want to make sure that I get the appropriate counts and values here. So I'm going to choose any. And obviously you can do existing if you really want to, and find out what it was originally or supposed to have been originally. Now that's it. And now I can hit calculate. So I'm going to do that. And what's going to happen is I'm going to get a couple of pop-ups. The main one is just a heads up that some of the spatial elements placed have invalid values, and there's an opportunity to see what they are. Vestibules, stairways, bathrooms, corridors, storage locker spaces, and this is a truncated list with additional rooms. I can tell you they're mostly the same thing. There is one room though, the sales space, that is a problem. We'll have to update that, and I'll show you in a minute why that's a problem. But I can hit OK. So most of these I'm aware of. I know that. So I'm going to hit OK here and just let it finish. I'm going to get a full report. Oh, I got a group error. That's because I grouped a room. All right. I'm going to get this full report that lists every single room that had an issue. So it's vestibules, bathrooms, entries, stairwells, corridors, mechanical, janitor, more closet space. Yeah, those are all expected. The one that's not here is that sales pit, room 132. So I'm gonna have to go revisit that one here in a second. You just hit OK and it's done. And if you look on my screen down here, you can see that for the areas that would require a human being to occupy it, I now have some values here. So my reception area gets 3. My break room has 22. This huddle space has 30, which seems a little odd for the size of it. So I'm probably going to have to check to see what that was associated with. But here you go. And that not only worked on the second floor, but that worked on every floor. So if I open up my first floor code plan, these are up to date too. So my training rooms have the appropriate values. This little lounge space, my reception areas, my conference rooms, we're all good here. So it's done and went ahead and did everything that I expected it to. Now, because that did what I wanted it to, and I'm happy with that, we can save this. These settings can be saved and brought and used on other projects. Now, it's just remembering your parameter settings here and what you set up down here, right, for this particular exercise. It'll save everything, so it knows the impassable objects and what the shortest path things that you've picked. But for the occupancy check, it's going to remember all of these settings. And if you did anything for the egress and the target loads and such, it'll remember those values and parameter values. Use it on any other project after that. And that way you're not reinventing the wheel every single time and trying to remember what you set up last time, what worked last time. If it works, save it, use it again. And it just creates its own little OFA settings file. I'll put it in my little occflow folder and we'll call it occupancy calcs. Done. All right. And then you can load it up on any other project at that point. So I'm going to quickly come over here and figure out real quick what I did with the sales pit. This particular space, if I select it and go to my properties, doesn't have an occupant category, which means it doesn't have an area per person. So if I specify this now with a business area, my area per person populated, and if I were to run this again, we should be all good. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and hit calculate again. I know, okay, so I'm going to get the same set of rooms. I'm going to hit OK. That updated. So we're good. So that was just a way for me to figure out what room I missed. There are ways to specify which space needs or doesn't need a code. So if, for example, if you didn't want to get those errors or deal with those because it's cumbersome and bothering, you have the opportunity to specify different values here. So you can create a category that says it's unoccupied, which provides an area per person of 0, and then it can run the calculations and not throw you a bunch of errors at the end of the day. And then they can be filtered out of your list and you're good to go. But then at least you're not dealing with a bunch of errors that are known issues that you're just going to simply ignore, right? That way, if it is an issue, it's an important issue. So not a bad idea to go ahead and group them accordingly and put things, if it's a common space, you put it in the common one, or if it's vertical circulation or something along those lines, you can try to group those up accordingly. Now, so that's one way to do it, right? And now I can add that to my schedule, which was here. I'm going to close this down. I can add that parameter to my schedule and call it a day, because why not? So I'm going to get rid of that one, put mine in, hit OK. It calculates the values for me. And if I had everything else set up accordingly, then I can put my totals in and get my grand total at the bottom. Okay, that's option 1 here. There's another way to do that if you don't want to use this tool, right? So this tool can potentially be a little overwhelming for those that are not terribly savvy Revit users. There's another way that we can do this that on the surface may seem even more overwhelming, but at the same time allows admins or BIM management teams to set up a repeatable process that is not so overwhelming and very simple and easy for a newer or less experienced Revit user to follow. So that is using a tool called Spreadsheet Link. So I'm going to take one step back and undo that real quick. I'm going to undo my loads here. Oh, come on. Yeah, right there. There we go. Now we got it. Okay. So if I jump into Spreadsheet Link, I have a couple of different things that I can, I guess that's not a couple of different things, but I have a way to put this together so that I get what I want. Okay. And I can do the math to get my calculations to then put it into my project. Okay. So that is going to be like this. So I'm going to pull up, I'm going to drag this up here a sec. I'm going to pull up my schedules list here, and I'm just going to source the same room occupancy schedule that we were looking at previously. And it's going to go ahead and load everything up as like this. I'm going to keep going. Here we go. Here we go. And so I've got the level, number, name, category, or space type, area, got my load factor in there, and then my occupancy parameter. So it's just pulling exactly what it sees from the schedule itself. Then if I want, I can do some additional sorting, like sort by level, then by number. So it matches more of what the schedule in Revit's doing exactly. If there's additional filters set up, go ahead and do that as well. Get it to be exactly what you need it to be. I'm using a different occupancy parameter here, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one and pull mine in. And I'm doing that so that I have a place to look to know that the changes were applied. And let's go. There we go. All right, now we've got it. So what I can do here is we can utilize an Excel format to do the math to get my occupancies calculated so that I can push it into my project files or save it out to an Excel file to be used in some other type of calculations or for some other purpose. Okay, so what I'm going to do is do that for you right now. So I've got all the parameters in here that I need. My occupancies are set correctly. Well, with the exception of that sales pit here. This one didn't have it, and that's okay. I'm not gonna, I can change it right now if I wanted to, and just call it business areas. Oh, okay, of course it's not gonna let me do it there. Oh yeah, I can't do it on a keyed value like that. That's right, that's right. Because it's a schedule key, I can't do it. So that, and that's fine. That's fine. I can go close this down, go back to Revit, make the change, but I'm not that worried about it. Not for this example. So what I am gonna do though is add a formula here. But before I can do that, I gotta dump the unit symbols from here so that I don't have to play all this extra games for dividing by 1 and whatnot. If I just hide the unit symbol, then I just get the values. Okay, which is exactly what I want. And now I can click inside any one of these cells and start typing out my formula. Now, the formula itself varies a little bit, and it largely depends on how you've organized your spreadsheets. Okay, so meaning what, you know, are you including the level parameter or the occupancy category parameter or anything else, right? It really just depends on what you're using here. But for the most part, that it looks a lot like this formula here. Now I'm just copying and pasting it because it takes a little bit to type out, and if I type it out, I tend to miss something. So it's a lot easier just to do this. And it's got its own little, it's an if statement, which is pretty common for a lot of stuff that we've done. If you've ever built a family in Revit, you've probably used a conditional statement, and if then else type of deal. Same idea here. And I've put some round down properties in there to keep it so that the values aren't are getting out of control. I do have to, I've got extra columns in here at this point, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and make an adjustment on which ones are actually being used. So I believe we need to go, instead of D and E, it needs to be G and H in both places, right? So, and effectively what we're telling it to do is take this data from this column, divided by data from this column, and then if the values are, and then it puts a round down in there to keep it to the lowest whole number. And if I did that right, which I didn't because I missed a setting, I'm sure. Yep. Or I just typed something incorrectly. I got a better idea. I'm gonna do this real quick because this guarantees that I didn't mess something up when I was trying to copy paste things around. I have a settings file preloaded, which allows me to cheat the system a little bit, but it also makes sure that we do it right. So here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and load this up real quick. Same, it's for the same exact thing. We're calculating the opportunity to calculate our occupancies with this. Now this one doesn't have it because I took it, I've changed the parameter for this exercise, but the formulas are still there. So, or the formulas in this case will work. Yeah, I don't understand why that didn't do it. So if I add my occupancy parameter to this and then paste that in here, there we go. And now I can start to drag that down and it starts doing the math for you, right? If it needs to. If it doesn't, then it doesn't, right? Now I've got extra settings in here, which I'll explain here in a minute what they are and how that was done. But effectively, I can drag this all the way down. If there's data to do the math for it, it's gonna do the math for me. I'm getting normalized values. If you if you want to say it that way. Really, they're just rounded accordingly, so that we're not overshooting anything. Everything's been rounded down to the nearest whole number, or given a value of 1, which is exactly what that formula is telling it to do, right? And because of the way I've dragged it, it goes ahead and updates the row numbers automatically for me, which is great. Saves me a little extra time of trying to customize it per row. Now, what I get to do at this point is if I want those back in my Revit file, I can just turn around and hit apply, whether it's the active worksheet or all worksheets. In this case, all of the other worksheets are for a different purpose that I'll explain shortly. So I just want to do the active one. If we were using the previous example, if I would have typed that properly or made that change correctly, I could have just done either or, it doesn't matter. But by applying the active worksheet, and again, I'm getting my group error again. I should just ungroup that. It's updating a certain amount of rooms. Some got an update, some didn't. And that's because those rooms didn't have anything to calculate because they were missing a value. And now what I can do is close this. New. And certain rooms got updated, and they're the same values that I was getting previously. So that's a second way to go about doing it. Now, what makes that process easier to use for somebody that isn't that familiar with Revit, let alone occupant flow analyzer or a spreadsheet link, we can use spreadsheet link express. And what that will allow us to do as the creator of the workflow, or if you're on the BIM management staff, is we can build out those settings. So if I load that up again, the exact same one, I can turn that into a repeatable process simply by saving my settings. And I should have done that before I closed it, and that's on me. But you can save your settings with the formulas in it, right? And I can save this. And if I actually put that formula in there so I don't, there. And then there's another little setting in here. If you're doing calculations, there's a checkbox here that you can check, which makes sure that if that list of rooms changes, it increases, or if other rooms get the values applied, it's going to update it and hit them all no matter what. So you want that checked. I want all of these applied all the way down. And I don't remember how to, yeah, there it goes. So it's already applied everywhere. And then I can save these settings. So I can do a save, give it a new name, put it in a folder that makes sense. And I'm just gonna throw it back in here again, room calculations, count CDB, that's me. Nope, I don't want to open the spreadsheet, that's okay. So at this point, theoretically, what I could do is give that to somebody. If it was just that one tab with just the room and the calculation on it, I give that to somebody and say, open up Spreadsheet Link Express, which is a much smaller little window, and load those settings. So I can go browse to them, go find them, grab it, hit open, and apply it. And it's going to run through that process. It's going to build out the table, it's going to do the maths, and it's going to push the data back into my project for us. Done. We've got it all handled. Now, there are a handful of videos on our YouTube channel that go through those exercises. So if you want to see how to set that up, go check that out. And I'll point those videos out here in a second because they apply to what I'm about to talk about now. So now I'm going to talk about what those extra tabs are at the bottom of that page. These tabs down here help us with doing additional levels of calculation based off the occupants and everything in your project. Oh, I loaded the wrong setting file. Jeez. All right, I went too fast. I didn't even look and see what I did. So you get to watch me do it now a third time. But what we've got here is once I've got my occupancy calculated here, right? I'll do this, we'll do this, and do that. And it's applied, good, okay. Once I've done that, by coming to these other tabs here are utilizing the area and the number of occupants, and it's doing additional math to find out how many fixtures per level are needed per sex, for males or females on which floor. And it's going through, so we've got a couple of different iterations for water closets, and we've got the rules applied, and then the formulas will vary depending on, you know, what we're trying to accommodate here. And then we have them for urinals, and then we have them for, you know, modifications for lavatories and drinking fountains and so on. And the idea here is that this is intended to take the data from this spreadsheet, do the math on these tabs, and then it gets saved to an Excel file. And then from there, I can use Schedule Excel to bring some of this information back into a, you know, schedule view in whatever order I want. So if I wanted to do this, and I can do it, and again, there's a workflow video that talks about this specific process, which I will again point out here momentarily. But I can then at this point save the file. And this is saving the Excel file this time. Pfixed CDB. If I save that, oh, that's why I saved the wrong file type. If I save that and it opens it, here's a list of everything again. So I've got my rooms tab, which is where all the data is coming from. I've got all my closets and drinking fountain types. I can now come back into Revit with these closed and use Schedule Excel to bring them in and bring in the ones that we're using for this project. So maybe there's an iteration, a combination of lavatories versus drinking fountains versus urinals versus whatever, and you're not sure what is needed for this particular project. Or at the moment in time, right, when you built the process. So this is just giving you flexibility to determine which one it needs to be depending on what the project type is. So what I can do here is grab the ones that I want to bring in. So I can either do this one at a time and say I want this tab, bring it in. Then I want this tab, bring it in. And then I want Lav method 3, bring it in, and drinking fountain method 2, bring it in. Or I can check this multiple worksheets or ranges and just check those boxes now. So if I do water closet 1, urinal 1, lavatory 3, drinking fountain 2, the other ones I don't need, I can go to my graphic options and say preserve everything. Each one is good there, no tables. Borders only, or do I want the red lines? I think I want everything. And I get to choose what pen weights I want to use for certain things, depending on where they come in. Great. Title text if it's multiple tables. In this case, it's not. Conditional formatting is great. Let's go. And it's going to create schedule views for all of this stuff. Or a drafting view if you would rather it be a drafting view. You can do that too. So it's running right now. You can't tell because it opened up off the load windows. But here it is. So I've got my 4 views. Everything's loaded in. If I go to my browser now and look for my Schedule Excel schedules, here they are. And now I can drag them into a sheet. And the idea here is that these all get placed kind of next to each other on the sheet. and you kind of build out one lengthy schedule. So the water closet one was always intended to be first because it gives you the level, the occupant count, and the male female. And then the rest of these three get lumped in after the fact. Kind of like this. So you put one in, then you put the next one in, then you put another one in, and then, oh, I don't remember what I missed. Water closets, lavatories, drink fountain, urinals. There we go. Kind of like that. And if I didn't, it looks like I messed with my Excel file just a titch to screw up my spacing. So I got to go back and adjust my formatting a little bit here to make sure that I have a cleaner output. But now everything lines up and everything's kind of set up the way I wanted it to be. And that was kind of the whole point of stitching it together the way we've stitched it together. Where are we at? 12:45. All right. So today, that's all I wanted to cover for today's webinar. I wanted to make sure we got through the occupancy portion and how we can utilize that information to calculate other pieces, in this case, plumbing fixture counts. And we got through showing you a couple of different ways to build out your occupancies using Occupant Flow Analyzer or Spreadsheet Link. Either way works beautifully. And if you actually build your occupancies using Occupant Flow Analyzer, you can still use Spreadsheet Link to incorporate that data into other forms of calculations like the plumbing fixtures. And in the next webinar, we are going to talk about how to take that data and go even further with it to help calculate means additional occupancy-based information for egress and firewalls and all the good stuff. And then a little bit more Schedule Excel to bring some cool numbers back in. So at that point, I want to wrap it up today and say thank you all for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Love to having you guys here, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next part 2 to the code calcs so that we can show you all the other cool tricks I got up my sleeve.